Welcome to Minutes with Mary, special podcast mini-series on the Enneagram. I'm your host, Mary Stelatello, certified Enneagram coach, and I'm joined by co-host Jayson Morris, also certified Enneagram coach and facilitator. We decided to launch this mini-series in celebration of World Enneagram Day on May 25th. The Enneagram has its roots in Greek philosophy, and in the last century, it has gained more exposure as a transformational framework. It offers insights on human nature, supporting self-awareness, team development, and organizational culture. Our aspiration is to share the Enneagram with more leaders, teams, and organizations. Each episode will explore different dimensions of the Enneagram and its value for strengthening your communication skills, navigating conflict, giving and receiving feedback, developing your leadership, building strong teams, and so much more. Let's get started. In today's episode of the Enneagram mini-series, Jayson and I will explore how the Enneagram provides insight to understanding your communication style and how others experience your style. We will share a few tips to keep in mind to get the most out of your conversations. Let's get started. Jayson, welcome back. Let's do a quick check-in to settle in. How are you coming into today's conversation?
I am well. I just facilitated part 3 of an Enneagram workshop yesterday, where we got into team Enneagram style and how knowing that can help a team see its collective strengths and its gaps. And then we discussed how they might address those gaps. And I'm super excited to be here with you again today to talk about the Enneagram and communication styles. And how about you, Mary? How are you coming into today's conversation?
Well, I'm feeling really full of energy. So I think it's going to be a great episode, listeners. In today's episode, we are going to explore different dimensions of the Enneagram. Our lives are dominated by communication, whether that's speaking, listening, verbal, written, online, visual, chat. The channels of communication are infinite. And thus, the opportunities for communication alignment and misunderstanding are infinite. So, Jayson, when you talk about the Enneagram and communication styles, where do you start? How does communication style come into play?
Well, what you just said really resonates. Communication is so foundational to all of our interpersonal relationships. And each of the 9 Enneagram types has their own unique style of communicating. And it's not better or worse than any other style, just different. And I think the challenge is that we often feel that our style is the right style, and we judge others accordingly. We make up stories in our head and we react to those stories. So when we start to learn about the strengths and the downsides of our own style and our own way of communicating, as well as the other 8 styles, a few things start to happen. We can learn to soften the rough edges of our communication style. We can learn to empathize and appreciate the other styles and the other ways of communicating. And when we get more advanced, we can start to tailor our communication in ways that will resonate with the other Enneagram types. It's like learning to speak 8 new dialects.
Oh, yes. Expanding our repertoire of communication styles, that is fantastic. Yes. As we talked about in our previous episode, the Enneagram starts with the individual and our own self-awareness, and then it can support understanding of the interpersonal dynamics, which can be with other individuals or within teams. It can take to that next level of systems within organizations. So let's unpack each of these levels, starting with the individual. How has the Enneagram helped you understand your particular communication style and how others experience your style?
Yeah. So as I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm a type 3, which is sometimes called the competitive achiever or just the achiever. And I'm all about getting things done, presenting a good image, receiving praise for what I achieve, in part because early on I attached my worth to achievement. So my communication style supports these objectives. And before I learned the Enneagram, I was so fully in the type 3 style of speaking really quickly with confidence and getting straight to the goals and what are the steps that we need to do. And kind of dismissing emotions and relationships. And threes are very concise, and we get impatient when there's lengthy conversations. And that was definitely true for me. And in learning the Enneagram, I've learned how to bring more relational connection and emotion into my communication. For example, I still write the body of an email and the core question of the next steps first. It's just what comes out. But then I pause and I add in the connection and the warmth. And I've literally learned to sit on my hands in meetings as a way to allow other types, other people that might have a less assertive communication style speak up in the meeting before I do, because I know, and I've actually gotten feedback that my energy can drown out other voices. There's a few types like that. Type sevens and eights often have that experience. And I see myself getting impatient in long conversations, and I adjust accordingly. Very much a work in progress, as my girlfriend will attest to, but it's bringing that self-awareness to how we communicate. And Mary, what about you? What are you learning about your communication style? What have you learned about your communication style through the Enneagram?
Well, Jayson, as you know, we are all a work in progress. And as a type eight, some of the things that you shared with respect to the assertiveness is something that I have constantly paying attention to in this lifelong journey to moving toward the best version of myself and ourselves. So, as someone who aligns with the Enneagram type 8, my meta message is be honest, forthright, and don't waste my time, right? So that don't waste my time piece, get to the punch is often something that aligns with that type 7, type 3 style as well. My style is to speak with clarity and being direct, perhaps a little bit too assertive sometimes, expressing certainty and confidence, and I've learned that my language and style can be quite intimidating. Couple that with my Italian heritage, which adds a bit of loud and bigness to my voice with animation and emotion. It doesn't always go well without intention. So, what I've learned through studying the Enneagram and reflecting on my natural inclinations about how I communicate is that energetically, because of my personality, I take up a lot of space. I walk into a room and I'm noticed without trying to be noticed. So, if I can dial down the volume and change the choice of words that I use to balance that strong action energy. And by doing that, I actually have better results. People can receive the information and not feel intimidated. So, one of my last positions before I became a consultant, I was leading a youth exchange organization, and one of my colleagues called me a straight shooter with a heart. That really resonated with me because, as our listeners will start to understand when we explore more of the Enneagram and the different styles, one of the lines from the style 8 is to the style 2. And the style 2 is in that heart center, that feeling center. So leaning more into that part of who I am can help balance when my style 8 is a little over calibrated. So, Jayson, when you think about working with leaders in the workplace, how have you seen the Enneagram support their interpersonal communication with colleagues and with teams? You just mentioned you got off a workshop and you've been doing a lot of work with teams.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to something you said, and then I'll bring it forward. That idea of showing up with taking up a lot of space and the big energy of your type eightness, and really loving that and appreciating that. So that was one of the first things that I noticed about you when we did our Enneagram workshop. And it's that intentionality, that modulation that you're talking about. How do we bring in that energy at the right level for wherever you are? And I think that ties to how I see the Enneagram supporting leaders. So there's so many examples we could go through each Enneagram type and talk about how individuals have learned to balance their core type communication. But some of my favorite examples are working with type 9 leaders. And type 9s sit right next to type 8s. And we'll get into this in one of our workshops and how there's a lot of opposites that show up. But type 9s are the peacemakers and the harmonizers. And sometimes they struggle saying no to requests or clearly delivering feedback. Sometimes they're too low energy. And so it can be really powerful in supporting them to find their voice. Often I have them start with saying, let me get back to you on a request rather than the automatic yes that comes out. And then they start working towards saying no to requests and they start working towards enforcing some of their boundaries. And it can start really scary, but they can discover that the fears in their head don't actually happen. And they can instead find more balance and more of their own power and their voice. And so it's a really beautiful way of helping nines rediscover their own needs, their voice, learning that conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I've seen it be so transformational in people's lives. After years of being unsatisfied or unheard, finding the strength to set new boundaries with a boss or leave a job that they had not been happy in. And like I said, we could tell a similar story for all of the types. On the team side of things, I love facilitating the communication session because that's where the light bulbs start to turn on in terms of linking the Enneagram to some of the interpersonal issues that and every team, quite frankly, has. So, for example, people might learn that their type 6 boss asks a lot of questions and discusses worries and what ifs because of his or her own core fear of being caught off guard, not because other people are doing a bad job. And they can let go of stories that they've created about their type 1 bosses who often have an unconscious orientation to right or wrong or should not or good or bad that can be experienced as being highly critical. And that is my lived experience with a type 1 boss until I learned about the Enneagram and that his language was not actually a judgment of my work, but was more related to his own way of viewing the whole world. And I could keep going, example after example, but let's hear from you. Like, what have you experienced?
Thank you for that. Those are such great examples of how our own internal narratives drive what we are perceiving of the other person's behavior. I love that. It can end up doing this do-si-do of misunderstandings. It's like, it's fascinating when you have enough trust with someone to actually unpack it and realize that was a do-si-do of misunderstandings and not get oppositional. So, I mean, I've worked with large teams, meaning 25 people that had subgroups, and then also very small teams of 4 people. And so different dynamics with the size of teams. However, what often is a common thread of insight for leaders and team members is there are multiple dynamics at play. So the style of the leader has a very strong influence because of their position of power, being the leader. The mix of individuals on the team influences how the team interacts. So, for example, if you have a team of 6 people and 4 of them are operating from their thinking center, that would be styles 5, 6, or 7, and 1 person operating from the feeling center, that's style 2, 3, or 4, and the leader operating from an action center, the style 8, 9, or 1. The person from the feeling center may experience that they are not being heard, even if they speak up regularly. Why is that? Why is that? Is because the style 2 team member communication doesn't resonate with the way other team members are processing the information. That style 2 team member operating from a feeling center will use language connecting with emotion and relationship. And the team members that are operating from that thinking center are looking for data and analysis and process language. And the leader's looking for some action language. So all that to say is that raising the awareness of these dynamics provides tremendous insight and opens up new channels for team members to be speaking and listening. And I always remind leaders that I coach and when I work with teams that understanding resides with the listener. So if there's a communication gap, it's your job as a speaker to shift your language so that you are creating shared meaning with that person. It's shared understanding. And we all have access to all of these different centers. We just like to lead with one. So being intentional about accessing the other centers when called upon will bring greater success in understanding and collaboration. So Jayson, coming to the end again of this episode, here's one last question. If there's one or two things that you want our listeners to leave with regarding the Enneagram and communication, what would those be?
So I love what your example, what you just said about the speaker's responsibility and those different thinking, feeling, and action styles. I actually facilitated a multi-day workshop for an ag tech company. And there was one person in the feeling center, type 4, which is the deepest feelers needing authenticity. And at the end of it, that person stood up when we were doing the closing comments and said, I feel like this workshop was a warm hug because of exactly what you just said, that idea that we need to speak all of the different languages. So it really is the speaker's responsibility to adjust their language. And I think that that's a hallmark of a truly talented communicator and leader. Inspirational leaders are going to find a way to meaningfully connect with everyone in their audience, which often means using thinking, feeling, and action or body-centered language. I would say the other thing is that this work is a process. It starts with slowing down and being more self-aware. And then we can start to shift how we communicate. And then lastly, I would say it can help to have a trusted ally on the team. So somebody who can give you feedback or perhaps even real-time signals, like scratching your head to say, Jayson, you're talking too much again. You need to slow down. Or maybe you're using too much thinking language and you need to use some feeling language. It's a lot easier for us to shift when we have people who are supporting us and helping us with our awareness. And with the Enneagram, we can position it as wanting to practice continual growth. So why wouldn't other people want to support us and help us along the way?
So true. It can be a complete game changer to have those signals in the moment, because those help us rebuild the neural pathways that we've been on autopilot with and that we're operating from. So moving from that autopilot to conscious driving, I would say. So in our next episode, we will explore how the Enneagram can help support navigating conflict when communication goes off track. You won't want to miss it. All right, listeners, before we close out this episode, I want to share one more game-changing opportunity. As we mentioned on the beginning of the episode, May 25th is World Enneagram Day. And to celebrate, we want to bring the Enneagram to more people in the world. We're offering a special Enneagram personal discovery promotion. We're offering access to the IEQ9 Integrative Enneagram Assessment, plus a live 45-minute individual debrief and coaching conversation with either Jayson or myself. We're both Enneagram coaches. And wait, there's more. A follow-up 75-minute introduction to the Enneagram virtual workshop. All for, get ready, just $250. It's a 50% discount. And we're offering this promotion during the month of May, and then the program will return to its regular price of $500. So you will find the link in the show notes. It will be only valid through May 31st. Now, if you're not ready to completely jump in and you want some more information, we are offering a 45-minute live webinar on May 22nd, which is free, to explore all 9 types of the Enneagram and other components that we are talking about in the podcast. So we really hope you will join us for one of these opportunities.